What would you do if the person who loved you the loudest suddenly acted like you never existed at all? That question wasn't a metaphor for Madison Carter. It wasn't poetic, philosophical, or distant. It was her real life. And it began on a Tuesday morning with a phone number that no longer worked. It's strange how fast something sacred can turn into a ghost. One moment you're lying in someone's arms, dreaming out loud about a future together, laughing, breathing in sync. The next, you're staring at your phone screen wondering if you imagined it all. Madison had never felt invisible in her life until that week. She wasn't just ignored. She was erased. Her pictures vanished from his social media. Her texts turned green. Their shared playlists were wiped clean. Even the necklace she had left at his apartment was never returned. No explanation. No warning. Just gone. As if she had been deleted from his timeline, his heart, and possibly his memory. A year before the disappearance, Madison had met him, Eli Hudson, at a friend's book launch in Brooklyn. He was tall, with dark eyes that seemed to read her like poetry. A screenwriter from Los Angeles visiting for a few months, he had an old-school charm and a quiet way of asking questions that made her feel seen. And for someone like Madison, who had spent most of her 20s overachieving, overgiving, and overthinking, being seen was revolutionary. She was 32 when they met. A content strategist by profession, a painter by passion, and someone who hadn't dated in over 3 years. Not seriously, at least. Not since the last heartbreak, one that had left her wary of almost everything that even remotely resembled intimacy. But Eli? He felt different. They started slowly. Coffee shops turned into dinners, which turned into long walks in Prospect Park. They talked about film, trauma, childhood, and their mutual obsession with rainy nights and handwritten notes. He once told her, "If I ever hurt you, I hope the earth opens and swallows me whole." She believed him, because back then, she had to believe someone. Fast forward to the morning it all cracked apart. It was Madison's birthday. She had planned nothing dramatic, just brunch at her favorite little cafe and a rooftop dinner with close friends. Eli had promised to surprise her. She had no reason to doubt him, until she texted at 8:03 a.m. "Can't wait to see you today." No reply. By 11 a.m., she was checking to make sure her messages were sending. By 2 p.m., his number rang once before going to voicemail. At 4 p.m., her best friend Zoe asked, "Are you sure you two didn't fight?" "No. Everything was fine last night. He even sent me a poem." By 6 p.m., Madison wasn't worried. She was terrified. A quick search of his Instagram showed his profile still existed, but all her photos were gone. Every tag, every mention. She wasn't just untagged. She was erased. Even the post where he had written, "You make the sky jealous," under their weekend getaway selfie, it was no longer there. It wasn't like Eli had unfollowed her. No, that would have been merciful. This felt surgical, intentional, complete. The week that followed was a blur of half-sleep, anxiety spirals, and desperate attempts to get clarity. Madison called his number every day. She emailed. She DM'd. She even asked the one mutual friend they shared, someone named Kira, who lived in LA, if he was okay. Kira's response: "Eli's back in California. I don't really know what happened with you guys. He doesn't talk about New York." Doesn't talk about New York? Did he not talk about her? Did she mean nothing? The months that followed broke her. But let's not jump too far ahead. Because Madison Carter wasn't always this version of herself. Strong, self-assured, slightly bitter, slightly brave. No. Once upon a time, she believed in fairy tales. She believed in healing through love. She believed people didn't just walk away without closure. Until Eli did. Until he didn't walk, he vanished. And somehow, the silence screamed louder than any goodbye ever could. For 2 whole years, she kept asking herself the same question over and over. Was I real to him? Or just a season he forgot to mention to the next girl? It was a cold evening in December, 2 years and 3 months since the day he disappeared, when it happened. She was walking out of a bookstore in Manhattan, hands full of poetry anthologies, scarf wrapped tight against the wind, when a familiar voice said her name.
Soft.
Uncertain. Madison. And time stood still. At first, she thought she had imagined it. Then she turned. And there he was. Eli. Looking older. Heavier in the eyes. Like someone who had carried guilt in his suitcase and hadn't unpacked it. His hand hovered near his coat pocket. He looked like a child who had practiced this moment 1,000 times in the mirror and still couldn't believe it was real. For a split second, she couldn't breathe. Then came the rage. Then the disbelief. Then the most confusing emotion of all, the ache. Because no matter how much time passes, some people don't leave your bones easily. He opened his mouth to speak again. But she raised her hand. Don't, she said, her voice low. You don't get to say my name. And just like that, the past 2 years collapsed between them. Everything was about to resurface. Everything he buried. Everything she tried to forget. Everything he erased. But this time, she had the power. And this time, she was going to find out why. Long before she ever heard the name Eli Hudson, Madison Carter was someone who always gave more than she received. Raised in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, Madison was the middle child of 3. Her father was a mechanic who spent most of his days buried under engines and rust, and her mother was a kindergarten teacher with a soft voice and a louder presence. Their house was never fancy, but it was filled with hand-me-down books, mismatched blankets, and the constant hum of Norah Jones playing on the record player. From a young age, Madison felt emotions too deeply. Her mom used to say, she feels things like weather. Sunny one moment, thunderous the next. But no matter what storm was brewing inside her, Madison was always the one who held space for others. The friend who listened without interrupting. The sister who stayed up till 2 a.m. comforting her siblings. The daughter who noticed when her dad was quietly falling apart but didn't know how to ask for help. By the time she was 17, Madison had already mastered the art of emotional labor. And she carried that habit well into adulthood. She moved to New York City at 24, chasing the illusion of becoming a full-time writer. Her degree in creative writing didn't get her far financially, so she pivoted, like so many do, and built a career in content strategy for a branding agency in Manhattan. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and allowed her to express some level of creativity. At 28, she found a cozy apartment in Brooklyn, 1 bedroom, creaky floors, and a tiny kitchen window that caught the light just right every morning. She turned the spare corner of her living room into a painting nook, complete with splattered canvases and brushes that smelled faintly of oil and turpentine. Painting had always been her sanctuary, her quiet rebellion against the fast-moving chaos of the city. But beneath this strong exterior, she had a fragile truth she kept hidden. She was lonely. Not in the dramatic Hollywood way, but in the deep, aching, nobody really knows me kind of way. She had friends. She had colleagues. She even dated occasionally. But she had never felt truly chosen. Until Eli. Madison met Eli Hudson at a book launch hosted in Soho by one of her old college friends. He stood near the back of the crowd, sipping on cheap white wine, flipping through a poetry collection like he was memorizing it for survival. Their eyes met across the room, not in the cliché kind of way, but in that quiet, who is he, does he look so lost kind of way. He wasn't loud or flashy. He wore an old leather jacket, a blue-gray hoodie, and black boots with laces that didn't quite match. His hair was slightly messy, his jawline shadowed by a few days of hesitation. But there was something about the way he looked at her when she said, "Do you always read at parties?" that made her stay in conversation longer than she meant to. Eli told her he was a screenwriter, temporarily living in Brooklyn while working on a script he couldn't finish in LA. He didn't like crowds. He had a soft spot for vintage typewriters and didn't believe in happy endings, just honest ones. And Madison, she was intrigued. Their relationship began slowly, cautiously, 2 wounded people testing the water with their toes. Madison liked to take her time. She had been burned before. Most of her past relationships were filled with half-truths and temporary affection. They ended in silence or with apologies that came too late. But Eli, he was intentional. He listened closely. He remembered the way she took her coffee, 2 sugars, 1 splash of oat milk, and the exact order of her skincare routine. He told her she had the kind of soul that could ruin a man in the best way. They spent hours just walking,
Talking.
sitting on stoops and sipping wine from paper cups. He brought her wildflowers from the bodega down the street and once painted lyrics from a Brandy Carlisle song on her bathroom mirror. He said he didn't believe in soulmates, but if he did, he'd have already found his. She shared everything with him. Her fear of abandonment. The reason she hated hospitals. How her older sister once disappeared for 2 years without explanation, and how it made Madison feel disposable. She told him about her high school poetry journal that no one had ever read, about the panic attacks she had in college, and how she learned to hide them behind calm smiles, about the night she thought she might end everything, and the morning after, when she chose to stay. And Eli? He didn't flinch. He just held her tighter. But here's the thing about trauma: sometimes it binds you to people who seem safe, but are simply familiar. Madison mistook familiarity for fate, and it cost her more than just trust. It cost her identity. She didn't notice the signs at first. How Eli started pulling away the moment she said, "I love you," for the first time. How his silences grew longer after she introduced him to her best friend Zoe. How he avoided making plans for the future, deflecting with jokes or kisses. There were red flags, yes, but Madison was a master at rationalizing. He's just stressed. He's afraid of getting hurt. He's never had something real before. But the truth? He was never fully there. And maybe he never meant to stay. The week before her birthday, Madison remembered something small but telling. They were lying on her couch, watching a documentary. She turned to him and asked, "Do you think people can just disappear from your life overnight?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Some people do. Some people have to." She laughed nervously. "Would you ever do that?" He paused, then kissed her forehead. "You ask too many questions, Maddie." She remembered that line so vividly when she sat alone on her rooftop that birthday night, wine glass in hand, candles flickering, phone silent. You ask too many questions. Maybe she did. But the one she couldn't stop asking was, why would someone love you like that and then pretend you never existed? Madison never got her closure. No letter. No explanation. No, I'm sorry. Just the gaping wound of a love she didn't know was already dying while she was still nurturing it. And that silence stretched for over 2 years. 2 years of rebuilding herself. 2 years of deleting his photos, then crying over doing it. 2 years of saying, "I'm okay," while falling apart in the shower. 2 years of learning that healing isn't linear, and some ghosts don't need to die to haunt you. But Madison didn't stay broken. She found herself again in the tiny rituals, waking early to paint, making Sunday pancakes, crying when she needed to instead of pretending. She took a solo trip to Vermont and watched the leaves turn red like her own rage transforming into grace. She stopped looking for him in crowds. Stopped expecting the apology that never came. She let the wound close, but never fully healed. Not until the night he reappeared. Not until the voice that once felt like home spoke her name again. And this time, she wasn't the same girl. This time, she wouldn't let him rewrite the narrative. This time, Madison Carter was the author of her own ending. It was a Tuesday evening when Madison's past arrived uninvited. The city had just slipped into that golden hour haze, warm light dancing off windows, the hum of evening chatter filling the streets of Brooklyn. Madison had just finished a work call, her third cup of green tea in hand, when she opened the door to check the mailbox. And there he was, Eli Hudson, the man she had trained her soul to forget. He stood at the bottom of her brownstone steps, hands buried in the pockets of a dark coat, eyes locked on hers like time had never passed. Like 2.5 years of silence didn't live between them. She froze. The mailbox key slipped from her fingers and clinked against the metal. "Hi," he said, voice softer than she remembered, but just as disarming. Her breath caught in her throat. The wind didn't blow. The birds didn't chirp. The city noise melted into a low static. Only his voice echoed.
"Hi, Maddie."
And just like that, her stomach knotted. Her first instinct was to shut the door. Her second was to scream. But the part of her that still remembered the curve of his handwriting, the scent of his neck, the lull in his voice when he said he'd never leave, that part stood still. "What are you doing here?" she managed to say, her voice dry like brittle paper. Eli looked older. Tired. Not aged, but weighed down by something invisible. His jawline sharper. His eyes darker. "I came to talk. I know I have no right. But please, just let me explain." Madison didn't invite him in. She didn't owe him comfort. Instead, she pointed to the cafe down the street. A public space. Neutral ground. They walked in silence. The air between them tight and buzzing, like a live wire had been pulled between their chests. She sat across from him at a tiny round table by the window. He ordered black coffee. She didn't order anything. "I only have 15 minutes, she said.
A lie.
But it gave her power. He nodded. "That's more than I deserve."
Good, she thought.
He still remembers how to bleed. The words came slow at first. He told her he had gone back to LA shortly after disappearing. That things had fallen apart, professionally, personally, mentally. He said he had a breakdown. That he was scared. That he didn't know how to ask for help. That he thought she'd be better off without him. "I didn't know how to love you the way you needed," he admitted. "I didn't even know how to love myself." Madison stared at him, expression unreadable. "So you erased me?" His lips parted slightly. "I didn't erase you." "No," she cut him off. "Because it felt like I vanished. Like you folded our memories into nothing and threw them into the fire." Eli looked down at his hands, fingers twitching. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said. "But not a day went by where I didn't think of you."
She scoffed.
"Thinking isn't the same as staying." Their conversation grew heavier, darker. Eli confessed that he had entered therapy 6 months after leaving her. That he'd been diagnosed with complex PTSD and severe depressive disorder. That shame kept him silent. That his apology was always just beyond the horizon, but he didn't believe he had the right to give it. "I was broken," he said. "But you didn't break me. I came to you already shattered." Madison clenched her jaw. "So, I was your rehab?" "No," he said quickly. "You were my safe place." "But you set fire to it," she replied, her voice low. The cafe air was thick now. The people around them blurred into background noise. Eli swallowed. "I'm not asking for another chance. I just needed to say I'm sorry properly. In person. Not in a text. Not through guilt. But with truth." She didn't cry.
She wanted to.
But the anger that had once paralyzed her was now a cold, controlled flame. "I mourned you like a death, Eli," she said. "And now you're standing here like a ghost with unfinished business." He nodded. "I know." The silence between them was seismic. Finally, Madison stood. "I don't hate you," she said. "But I also don't need you anymore." His eyes glistened, but he didn't stop her. She walked out of the cafe, heart pounding, lungs tight, vision blurry.
She didn't look back.
But endings rarely come clean, especially when the person you buried comes back breathing. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Seeing Eli had reopened a wound she thought had long scarred over. She found herself replaying old conversations, rereading journal entries from the year he left, hearing echoes of songs they once slow danced to in her tiny apartment. She hated it. She hated that one encounter could unravel her so quickly. Even though she hadn't let him back in, a part of him was already there. Zoe, her best friend, noticed the shift. "You're spiraling," she said one night over dinner. "I'm not," Madison insisted. "You are," Zoe said, stabbing her salad. "Your paintings have gotten darker. You've stopped baking. You cried during a cat food commercial yesterday." Madison forced a laugh. "I'm just processing." "Don't process your way back into his arms," Zoe warned. "I'm not." Zoe looked at her, eyes full of loyalty. "You survived him once, Mads. You don't owe him another chance just because he finally found the guts to face you." But Madison wasn't thinking about forgiveness.
She was thinking about truth.
There was still so much she didn't understand. Still so much Eli hadn't said. And even if she didn't want him back, She needed to know who he really was. Not the man she fell in love with, but the man who left without a word. So when she received a short email a week later titled, "There's more I need to tell you," she opened it. And what she read made her stomach drop. Eli had lied. Not about everything, but enough to rip open old wounds. He hadn't left just because of mental health or fear. He had been involved with someone else. Briefly. Emotionally. And while it may not have been physical, it was betrayal. A woman from his past. Someone he ran into in LA, someone he never mentioned. He claimed it was short-lived. That he ended it the moment he realized what he was doing. But it was the reason he never said goodbye.
Shame. Guilt.
Cowardice. "I couldn't face you after that," he wrote. "You were the only thing in my life I ever got right. And I destroyed it." Madison stared at her screen, hands trembling. She thought the betrayal had been abandonment. But now she saw it was layered. Abandonment.
Lies.
Infidelity of the heart. She wasn't just erased, she was replaced. Even if only temporarily. And that truth broke something deeper inside her. Because it meant her pain wasn't just about loss. It was about humiliation. The anger returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was clarifying. She realized then, Eli hadn't just left her behind. He had chosen something else. Someone else. And though he claimed it meant nothing, it had cost her everything. Her sense of self. Her trust. Her worth. Madison shut her laptop. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but not out of grief. Out of rage. Not the uncontrolled kind, but the kind that gave you spine.
She wouldn't respond.
She wouldn't curse him out. She wouldn't send back a list of all the nights she cried herself to sleep. She would do what he never could. She would walk away with dignity. Brooklyn's winter had always been moody, swinging between sudden snow flurries and moments of strange warmth. But that day, as Madison stood staring out of her art studio window, watching the world turn to gray outside, she felt a peculiar stillness. Not numbness. Not sadness.
Clarity.
She hadn't responded to Eli's email. It had been 3 weeks. In that time, she poured herself into painting, no longer avoiding the darker palettes. She embraced the chaos, blacks, stormy purples, deep crimson. Every canvas became a battleground. Every brushstroke, a scream she never got to release. And then, her hands did something they hadn't in 2 years. They painted light, without thinking, without effort. It started as a single soft ray, yellow bleeding through blue. Then a silhouette. A woman standing in front of a mirror. Her reflection cracked, but her posture tall. Madison had painted herself. Not the version Eli remembered. Not the girl who waited by the phone. But the woman who survived being erased. The gallery showing came fast. Zoe had pulled some strings and convinced a Midtown curator to display Madison's work for a women's resilience-themed exhibition. "You have to do this," Zoe had told her. "Not for him. Not for anyone. Just for you." And for the first time in years, Madison said yes to something that scared her. The night of the event, she wore navy blue, a shade she once avoided because Eli said it clashed with her skin tone. She wore it like armor now. The gallery buzzed with soft jazz and murmured conversation. Strangers paused in front of her work, whispering interpretations. Words like raw, reclaiming, quiet power circled the room. Madison stood silently near the back, watching her pain reflected in others' eyes, and it felt healing. Until her breath caught. Because he walked in. Eli. He didn't approach her right away. Instead, he lingered near the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he observed her piece titled, "What Was Left Behind." It was the one she'd painted after his confession, the one that showed a crumbling silhouette fading into smoke while another rose from the ashes. He stared at it for a long time, then, slowly, turned to face her. Their eyes met across the room. No words, just an understanding that something had permanently shifted. When he finally walked toward her, Madison didn't move. She didn't run. She didn't brace. She stood. Because this time, he couldn't shake her. "Your work," he said softly, stopping just a few feet away. "It's beautiful." She gave a tight nod. It wasn't meant to be. But it is. He looked down. I didn't expect to see you here, she said. I didn't plan on it, he replied. Zoe posted about it. I wasn't sure if I'd come. But then I saw your name on the invite list. He exhaled slowly. I know I don't deserve to say this again. But what I did, how I left, it's haunted me every day since. I know, Madison replied. And then, for the first time, she smiled. But it wasn't for him. It was for her. I read your email, she continued, voice calm. I appreciate your honesty. Even if it came late. Too late. I understand. I think I finally do, too, she said. You didn't just run from me. You ran from the mirror I held up. From the version of yourself you weren't ready to face. He winced, like the truth hurt. Because it did. But I faced her, she added. That broken girl you left behind? She's not here anymore. She gestured around the gallery. This woman is. Eli nodded, eyes glassy. You've become someone remarkable. No, she said softly. I remembered who I was before you made me doubt it. Another silence passed. This one wasn't heavy. It was hollow. Final. You once asked me to forgive you, Madison said. And the truth is, I already have. His head lifted. But that doesn't mean I want you in my life. His lips parted, but she raised her hand gently to stop him. I forgive you for me, not for you. He blinked slowly. I'll go, he whispered. You should, she replied. But take this with you. What you broke no longer defines me. I do. He nodded, eyes wet but understanding. He turned and walked away. This time, Madison didn't watch him leave. Because she wasn't the one being left behind. Weeks passed. The gallery reached out again. They wanted to represent her formally. Her pieces had sparked interest from collectors, writers, and even mental health organizations. Madison found herself speaking at a women's recovery panel in Manhattan, sharing not just her art, but her journey. She talked about love, yes. But more importantly, she talked about losing yourself and finding your way back. One evening, as spring hinted its arrival through the whisper of budding trees, Madison received a package. There was no name, just a plain brown envelope and a small, wrapped box. Inside the envelope, a letter. Maddie, I'm leaving New York. Maybe for good. I've started something new in Oregon, somewhere quiet where I can rebuild. No contact. No expectations. But I wanted you to have this. A goodbye. Not an erasure. Inside the box was a Polaroid. Old. Slightly faded. It was of Madison, years ago, laughing beside a fountain, hair messy, paint on her cheeks, sunlight kissing her skin. She had forgotten that day. But he hadn't. On the back, he had scribbled, You were always light. I just wasn't ready to stop standing in the dark. She didn't cry. She smiled. Not because it was romantic, but because it reminded her that she had always been unforgettable, even to the one who tried to erase her. And as she stepped onto her rooftop that night, wine in hand, stars flickering above, she whispered into the wind, Goodbye, Eli. No bitterness. No regret. Just release. Because the story was hers now, and she was writing the rest without him. There's something powerful about reclaiming your own name. Not the one someone else whispers when they need you. Not the one they delete when they no longer want you. But the name that holds your truth, your strength, your silence, your roar. Madison Carter didn't just survive heartbreak, she transcended it. But her story is not just her own. It could be yours. Because somewhere, at some point, you might find yourself in a similar silence, staring at a door that never closed properly, holding memories that ache like unhealed bruises, wondering if you were ever enough. Let me tell you this. You were always enough. And no one, no betrayal, no vanishing act, no cold goodbye can strip you of the worth you were born with. Maybe you've loved someone so deeply that you didn't see the red flags. Maybe you built a future on shaky foundations because your heart hoped it would hold. And maybe, just maybe, you were erased too. Not literally, but emotionally. Bit by bit. Day by day. Until one morning you woke up and didn't recognize the reflection staring back at you. That reflection wasn't weak. She was wounded, but still standing. And that's courage in its purest form. Forgiveness isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's an act of rebellion. Rebelling against the idea that you'll carry the pain forever. That you'll always be bitter. Always broken. Always waiting for closure. Madison didn't forgive Eli to invite him back. She forgave him to set herself free. She forgave him so she could wake up and breathe without chains on her chest. So she could laugh at stupid movies.
Paint with wild hands.
Dance in her kitchen to old love songs that once haunted her. Because forgiveness is an open window, not an open door. And what about you? What are you holding on to? A message never replied to? A person who loved you halfway? A betrayal wrapped in silence? Ask yourself, how long will you let someone else's cowardice write your story? The truth is, you don't need an apology to heal. You don't need them to return. You need you. Your courage. Your voice. Your reflection, cracked, maybe, but still shining. When Madison received that last letter, she didn't feel a spark of old feelings. She felt peace. The kind of peace that doesn't beg, doesn't question, doesn't ache. Because she had done the work. She had rebuilt the home within herself that someone else tried to burn down. And you can too. Maybe your version won't include a gallery. Maybe it's a poem, a trip, a new career, a hard conversation, a quiet walk through the park without tears. Whatever it is, start it. Light the match. You don't need to be fully ready. You just need to be done with carrying what was never yours to hold. So, here's your question to carry forward. Are you ready to remember who you were before they forgot you? Because she's still there.
Brave. Bold.
Unapologetically whole. You don't have to erase what happened. You don't have to pretend it didn't cut you. But you can rewrite the ending. Just like Madison. So, whether you're standing in front of your own metaphorical canvas, or staring at a chapter you're scared to close, know this. You are not what they left behind. You are what rises after. Start again. Begin again. Love again, especially yourself. This is your moment. Not to wait for someone to come back, but to walk forward, knowing you never needed them to define your worth in the first place. And if you ever wonder if you're strong enough to face what comes next, remember Madison.
She did.
And so will you.